Welcome, everyone, to the November 15th. Welcome, everyone, to the November 15th Library Advisory Commission meeting, coming to you live from the newly remodeled La Selva Beach branch. Clerk Simona Vargas, will you please do a roll call vote?
Rena Dubin.
Present.
Jennifer Mount is absent. Mary Ripma.
Here.
Mike Termini.
Here.
Pamela Woll.
Here.
Tricia Wynne.
Here.
And Chair Lindsay Bass.
Here. Great. We will move on to agenda item number 2, which is adoption of tonight's agenda. Are there any comments or questions, or is there a motion on the floor?
Move to adopt the agenda.
I'll second it. We have a motion to adopt the agenda by Commissioner Termini and a second by Commissioner Wynne. Clerk Simona Vargas, will you please do a roll call vote?
Rena Dubin.
Aye.
Mary Ripma.
Aye.
Mike Termini.
Aye.
Pamela Woll.
Aye.
Tricia Wynne.
Aye.
And Chair Lindsay Bass.
Aye. That passes unanimously. So we will move on to oral communications. And oral communications is for any member of the audience to address the board on any matter, either on or off the agenda that is within the board's jurisdiction. The board is not able to undertake extended discussion or act on any non-agendized items. If you intend to address a subject that is on the agenda, please hold your comments regarding that item until it is before the board so that we may properly address all comments on that subject at the same time. In general, we'll give 3 minutes per speaker during oral communication with a maximum of 30 minutes set aside at this time. Moderator Jones, do we have any oral communications from the public tonight?
Chair Bass, there are no public comments.
Okay. We will then proceed to item 4 on our agenda tonight, which is the report by the interim library director. We did receive a written report, but we will open the floor, Eric, for any comments on your report.
Thanks. And I did just want to thank Rena and Mary. I think you also joined one of the focus groups for the downtown library.
Yes.
So I wanted to thank you very much for your participation in that. I thought those went really well. And I also just wanted to mention that we had planned originally to have a community event where we were going to work on the strategic plan, which you were part of that committee, but we have moved that off to January. So I'll be circling back to you soon with a specific date in January for that. So just wanted to provide that update. Thank you.
Were there any comments or questions on the director's written report? Seeing none, we will move on to the report from the Friends Executive Director. We have Bruce Cotter here with us tonight. Bruce, the floor is yours.
Great. Can you hear me, Commissioner Bass? Here. Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I think I know most everybody that's here, but for the benefit of the public, as Chair Bass said, my name is Bruce Cotter. I'm the Executive Director of the Friends of the Santa Cruz Public Libraries. Prior to taking that position, I had the great pleasure of serving on this commission. So it's nice to be back. It's good to see you all again. I'd like to speak briefly on a couple of topics this evening. The first is the mixed-use facility that is proposed for downtown, and I want to stress the absolute support of the board of the Friends of the Public Library for this project. Several of us, as Eric just mentioned, several of us from the board, as well as Commissioners Ripma and Dubin and Bass, had the opportunity to meet with Abe Jason and his team, as well as representatives from Eden Housing, which is the affordable housing design group. And we were all extremely impressed by the design work that has gone into this project. In addition to providing a new and modern library for this town, it will include affordable housing, which a wide majority of the people who live here believe to be a critical need in Santa Cruz. Also, the designers plan to include a rooftop outdoor space that can be used by residents, by the library for programs, by library users and members of the community. There's to be a daycare facility for children that will have its own secure entrance to the library. There will be parking spaces to replace those that will be eliminated from Lot 4, as well as retail space. I'd just like to say, I think we all left really excited about the possibilities and looking forward to seeing the final two options that will be presented to the City Council in the near future, I believe in December. We support the mixed-use facility for several reasons. The primary among them are it will provide our community with a new downtown library that has proven to be the most cost-effective and functionally efficient option to replace the existing unsafe, outdated, and undersized library. Attempting to renovate that structure will take longer, will cost more, and will result in a library that is smaller and much less functional than what. Hear me still? Yes, okay. That's why I got it. I'm muted. Okay, thank you. Secondly, it'll provide 100 affordable housing units. Santa Cruz desperately needs affordable housing. This is one of the largest affordable housing projects in the county that is, in the approval cycle and moving forward rather than just kind of visioned. Third, it's a result of an extensive period of planning. It's gone through several different city council configurations. It's had extensive engagement with the community over the last 8 years. There have been committees of community stakeholders like the Downtown Library Advisory Commission, and there's been the involvement of architects, planners, and city council subcommittees. This is a well thought out program and project for the town. One final comment that I would make is just to make clear that no Measure S funds are being spent on anything but the library. The housing portion has its own funding. The parking lot will be funded separately as well. And I've heard other people say other things. That is the reality. The Measure S funds here are being used on the library. So it's the intent of the Friends to work actively with Downtown Forward, with Affordable Housing Now, with any other organizations to support this project to move it forward to a successful conclusion. And I'm confident that you guys will be involved as well. We will be fundraising for it next year. And that kind of takes me to my second item I wanted to touch on. As you know, we made a commitment to raise $1 million this year to benefit the Aptos, Branciforte, and Garfield Park branch libraries. That was a substantial project. It was more than this organization has ever looked on raising in the past. And it was complicated and challenged a little bit by the fact that we don't have a chapter in Branciforte and we don't have a chapter in Garfield Park. And of course, we had COVID going on and the pandemic causing the inability to use kind of classic, let's all get together and have a party fundraising techniques. Despite that, I am pleased to tell you we are over $915,000 to date. I mean, just a phenomenal amount of money. This town has been incredibly generous. I thank our generous community. I want to thank our hardworking volunteers, in particular, our three co-chairs, Cindy Jackson, Martha Dexter, and Commissioner Tricia Wynne, who've just done a phenomenal job in bringing this forward. I have no doubt that we are going to be successful in completing that $1 million number. I have nothing else for this evening other than it's nice to see you all. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to respond to them.
Thank you so much, Bruce. What an outstanding report, and I really appreciate your comments and clearly laid out explanation of the mixed use project as well. Commissioners, are there any questions or comments for Bruce on this update? Vice Chair Dubin?
Do you know when you will be starting the fundraising for downtown?
You know, we don't yet, Rena. It will be sometime next year. We're still waiting to hear back from Abe and his group for kind of what the numbers are going to look like. so we know what we're trying to, what the gap is that we'll be trying to fill. The difference this year was we were much further along in the process with grants of 40, Garfield Park and Aptos. We're not quite that far along yet. I would hope by mid-spring to have a good solid sense and to be really underway. That was kind of the timing we went with this year, and I would hope to be able to do the same thing in 2022.
Fantastic. Great. Well, Bruce and please keep up the great work. I know you will keep us posted on your efforts and how the Library Advisory Commission can be supportive of the work that you all are doing, evidenced by the fact that many of those co-chairs used to be commission members and present commission members. So thank you again for your
We're
leadership and
shameless.
your wonderful work, and we look forward to your next update.
Great, thanks, Sharon. Yes.
With that, we will move right along to member reports. So this is an opportunity for commissioners to share any updates on their activities related to the Library Advisory Commission and the library branches. Vice Chair Dubin.
Yeah, so I was involved in two different activities, as two different subcommittees, I guess. One was for the hiring of the new director, and that was a really interesting process. So hopefully that will all be resolved soon. It was a focus group with several of you and the friends. And the other thing that we did was what Eric was mentioning was being part of the downtown revisioning seminar, I guess, on Zoom. And it was really, really inspiring to me. And it's something that I was thinking maybe that as a commission, just to throw it out there, that it's something maybe we could think about doing, just to gather just more information for from the public. I really liked how they asked the questions that they asked, and the whole format. It was like on a whiteboard, so they had a question and then they just gathered information from people. I don't know how hard it is to solicit people to come to something like that, but especially if it was in person in a later date. It was just really great for me to be able to hear what other people had to say. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to stay for a whole session. So it's something that I would love to just sit back and really be in a place where I could just listen to what the community, what they want to see out of their library. I think it would be good for all of us.
Commissioner Wynne.
Thank you very much. So I have not gone out of town much for the last 18 months, but I was out of town for both of those events, and I'm sorry about it. And I had volunteered to be on the strategic planning committee, so I do look forward to that work, and I do hope that we will be really pulling in the community, and the community does seem energized around library issues. So anyway, I am willing to commit, but I am apologizing for missing those two events.
Okay, sorry about that. Are there any other comments, reports from commissioners? Commissioner Termini?
I can put a different hat on right now and tell you that the design team delivered 50% construction documents to the county last week for Aptos, and they're on schedule for just before Thanksgiving, doing 90%. So we're like this close.
So many exciting announcements.
May I just ask a question?
Please, Commissioner Wynne.
Thanks so much, Commissioner Termini. That is very exciting as an Aptos branch enthusiast. Do we know when I saw that the fencing went up around it. Do we know? The question that I get asked more than any other question in life is, when are they gonna begin demolition? The library's been closed since June. Do you have any idea?
We anticipate January or mid-February.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the fellow who built that library, this great 92-year-old former general contractor, phoned me last week and he goes, if there's any way I can walk through it before they tear it down. I thought that was really sweet. So we'll make that happen as well. It is, by the way, a beautiful design. Anderson Burley has done a remarkable job.
Outstanding. Great updates. And just on the new director recruitment, I wanted to comment that I'm really impressed with the caliber of candidates that are in the selection committee's purview at this point. So I think it's only a win for the community at this point. And then just on the comments for the from Vice Chair Dubin on the re-envisioning downtown process, if there is a way for us to incorporate any of those strategies or community feedback approaches as we move forward with the strategic planning in our work, I'd love to think about how we might do that. Make sure we get active community involvement. So thank you everybody for all of your amazing work and support for the work of the library over the last several months. If there's no other member reports or comments, seeing none, we can proceed to item 6 on our agenda tonight, which is our consent calendar. There are 2 items on the consent calendar. The first is our minutes from our September 20th meeting. And also there are the submitted draft work plan accomplishments. Are there any questions or comments on the consent calendar items? Would anyone like to pull either of those items?
And I just want to, sorry, that was a typo. It's not the draft accomplishments anymore. That is the final accomplishments, but I apologize.
Very good. Okay, seeing no questions on the consent calendar, I'll accept any motions on the floor.
I'll move consent.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a move to approve the consent calendar by Commissioner Termini and a second by Commissioner Wynne. Clerk Samana Vargas, will you please do a roll call vote?
Rena Dubin,
Aye.
Mary Ripma,
Aye.
Mike Termini,
Aye.
Pamela Woll,
Aye.
Tricia Wynne,
Aye.
and Chair Lindsay Bass.
Aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. And that brings us to item 7 on the agenda tonight, which is our presentations. We have 2 presentations. The first being on conflict of interest. That will be led by Mary Haley Owsley.
And I just want to thank Mary Haley for joining us tonight. There were a number of questions last time we met in Capitola around the policy on conflict of interest. So I thought it was best to have her come. And she's one of the attorneys for the library and can walk us through this and then take any questions that you may have. Thank you very much, Mary Haley.
Good evening, commissioners. Oh, sorry, is that a background info or background? Is that better? Okay, good evening, commissioners. My name is Mary Haley Owsley, and I'm an attorney at Atchison, Barrisoni, and Condati. I'm here to give you an overview presentation of conflict of interest. This information is just to give you a big picture of what may constitute a conflict of interest. We don't expect you to do this analysis yourself. These rules are highly complex and highly fact-specific, so please reach out to our office if you do, in fact, have a question or a concern that there may be a financial conflict of interest, and we can help you with that analysis. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, can everyone see that? Okay, great. So let's just get started. So the basic rule governing conflict of interest is that a public official may not make, participate in making, or in any way use or attempt to use their official position to influence a governmental decision when they know or have reason to know that they have a financial interest in the decision. And a governmental decision means any action taken by a government agency that has a financial effect on any person other than the governmental agency making the decision. With regards to a conflict of interest analysis, we're concerned with a disqualifying financial interest. So a public official has a disqualifying financial interest in a decision if it is reasonably foreseeable that the decision will have a material financial effect distinguishable from its effect on the public generally, and we'll talk more about that later, on the official, a member of his or her immediate family, or on any qualifying financial interest. The FPPC employs a 4-step analysis to determine whether there is a disqualifying financial interest, and we'll walk through those briefly. So the overarching question in step 1 of the analysis, is it reasonably foreseeable that the governmental decision will have a financial effect on any of the public officials' financial interests? So what is a financial interest? You'll ask yourself, do you or an immediate family member or a business in which you are a 10% or more owner have a financial interest in the decision? There are a number of financial interests on this slide. So any business entity or real property in which the public official has a direct or indirect investment worth $2,000 or more is a financial interest. A source of income, so say your employer aggregating $500 or more within a 12-month period would be a financial interest. A business entity in which you are a director, officer, partner, trustee, employee, or hold any position of management would be a financial interest. And finally, for gifts, it says here the statutory requirement is still, or statutory minimum is still $250 or more, but the FPPC regulations now provide for a $520 limit for gifts. So we go off the FPPC regulations for gifts. I do want to touch on a question that was raised at the last meeting as to what the definition of indirect investment means. So Government Code Section 87103 defines indirect investment or interest as an investment or interest owned by 1, a public official's spouse or dependent child, 2, an agent acting on behalf of the public official, or 3, a business entity or trust in which the public official or the public official's agents, spouse, dependent children own directly or indirectly at least a 10% interest. So once it's established that there is a financial interest, we then ask, is it reasonably foreseeable that the governmental decision will have a financial effect on that interest? The FPPC generally looks at whether the official's financial interest is explicitly involved, whether it's a named party or subject of the proceeding. If so, then reasonable foreseeability is presumed. Even if it's not a named party or a subject of the proceeding, a financial effect is reasonably foreseeable if it can be recognized as a realistic possibility, but more than hypothetical or theoretical that a public official will be impacted financially by a governmental decision in which he or she is participating. In other words, is it a realistic possibility that the decision will actually affect the official's financial interest, or is it too remote or theoretical? The question is not whether the public official is certain to benefit from the governmental decision, but whether the likelihood that he or she might benefit is so great that he or she would be subject to those temptations what the statute seeks to avoid, which is generally bias from a financial interest. So once it's determined that there is a financial interest and that it's reasonably foreseeable, we ask whether the reasonably foreseeable financial effect will be material. Materiality means important or substantial. Decisions that are nominal, inconsequential, or insignificant will not be deemed material. Materiality also depends on the type of interest, say business entity, real property, source of income, etc. Each type of interest has separate standards, which are quite numerous, and which our office can help or can assist with determining. So here are some brief examples of materiality at work. These are the more clearly defined and essentially more obvious defined material conflicts. So business entities and sources of income conflicts are fairly intertwined, so I've included them together here. For example, if a business entity or a source of income, say your employer, is a named party in or the subject of the decision by the agency, the effect is material. So what does that mean? For example, a business entity. Say a commissioner owns a business that offers to sell a product or service to the library. That would be a material conflict. For sources of income, say a commissioner's employer is bidding on a contract with the library. That would also be a material conflict. So the standards for real property, or at least one standard, depends on kind of the distance from an official's property versus whatever kind of decision the library is deciding. So for real property, there's a presumption that a decision involving property within 500 feet of an official's property will have a material impact on the official's interest. So if a commissioner owns property that is located within 500 feet of a proposed library development, say, that would be a material conflict. And a final example is for sources of gifts. A gift is any payment or other benefit that confers a personal benefit for which the official doesn't provide payment or services of equal or greater value. So say a commissioner is gifted tickets to a sporting event worth $1,000 from a business bidding on a contract with the library. That would be a material conflict. So the third step in the analysis is more of an exception so we've gotten from step one to step two, and then we've determined that there is a material financial conflict of interest. Step three is asking, is that material financial interest, is the effect of that indistinguishable from its effect on the public generally? This means that a significant segment of the public will be affected by the decision, and the effect of the official's interest is not unique compared to the effect on that significant segment of others. And that, again, has its own set of requirements that we can also help in determining. In step four, again, we've already determined step one and step two that there's a material financial interest, which would be a conflict. And if it's not exempted under step three, then essentially the public official should recuse themselves from participating in making, or attempting to influence a government decision. So voting, providing information or an opinion or a recommendation for the purpose of affecting the decision without significant intervening substantive review, that should all be avoided, should there be a financial interest involved. I do want to touch briefly on contractual conflicts of interest under Government Code 1090. So Government Code 1090 restricts local agency officers and employees from making a contract in which they are financially interested. It's intended to apply to any situation that would prevent the officials involved from exercising absolute loyalty and undivided allegiance to the best interests of the public entity. It's intended to strike at actual impropriety as well as the appearance of impropriety. Essentially, it provides that no body or board may make a contract that is financially beneficial to one of its members, even if the interested member does not participate and abstains from the decision or vote. This means that if a member of the legislative body has a financial interest in the contract, then the government agency, and not just the official, is precluded from entering into the contract, even if the interested member abstains. And there are a number of consequences and penalties for noncompliance. For example, the contract is void. The official would have to surrender whatever consideration was paid to that official. And there are potential criminal charges involved, fines, potential imprisonment, and being barred from holding public office again in the future. So if you have any questions under Section 1090, please reach out to our office. So what do you do if you have a disqualifying financial interest? First, publicly disclose the financial interest giving rise to the conflict or potential conflict. Second, recuse yourself from discussing and voting on the matter. And three, leave the room, or if you're on Zoom, mute yourself and turn off your microphone until after the discussion, vote, and any other disposition of the matter is concluded. So some final considerations. Again, analysis of conflicts is highly complex and highly fact-specific. If you have questions or in doubt as to a financial interest, please seek advice from our office. If a decision is coming before the commission and you think you may have a conflict, we can assist in preparing a letter to the FPPC and getting advice from the FPPC. And getting the advice from the FPPC is recommended because if the FPPC concludes that there is no disqualifying conflict of interest and a member of the public sues you for potential conflict, the FPPC opinion can be used as an affirmative defense in the lawsuit in the future. Okay, that concludes my presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary. Very, very helpful. Thanks for laying it out so clearly in those 4 steps. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments for Mary as Commissioner Termini?
Mary, a question about, first of all, our decision-making powers are virtually nil. We're an advisory body only. So how strongly does this affect us, members of this particular body?
It would really depend on the decision before the commission. I don't want to advise on an issue that's not before the commission. So if you do have a potential conflict, or you think you may have a conflict, I would advise reaching out to our office.
And then second part of the question is, if you do have a conflict, if you're employed by someone who has a contract with the library system / the county for the library, is it enough just to recuse yourself, or should you just not be on the board?
I'm not sure I'm quite understanding okay, sorry. Recusal is fine in that situation. Sorry about that.
That's okay, thank you. I don't often get to hold a lawyer speechless. So thank you. That was very nice.
Are there any other comments or questions? Great, and I think a general takeaway message is that you all are available as a resource if we do have any follow-on questions about potential conflicts of interest. So great to be introduced to you and have you as a resource if any such circumstance should arise in the future. So thank you, Mary.
If I could just add one thing, I just following up on your point, like the board, the Joint Powers Board really looks to the Library Advisory Commission to help decide on policies around values of the community. So I would say somehow I don't quite know how to articulate it, but this body does fall in, I think, beyond just providing advisement, because they really do consider which direction to go when it comes to those policies. So it is significant. I just don't want people to walk away thinking they really do defer to this body on those policies. So that they may then endorse it, but they will look to you first for direction on where to go with those policies.
Well, that will conclude our first presentation on conflicts of interest. So we can move to our second presentation, which is with Laura Whaley on the staffing model and challenges.
And I just want to introduce Laura. We are very lucky. Laura has stepped in to the position of interim assistant director. And she did this during a lot of change in the organization. And when the board was asking to meet, the Library Joint Powers was asking to meet, they developed a subcommittee to review staffing levels for the library. And as she goes through her presentation, and she'll go into this, I just want everyone to keep in mind a couple of things. One, the library never really made itself whole again after the Great Recession. And as we go into this new chapter for the library of opening these new buildings, one thing that we know is that new buildings attract a lot more patrons. And we see it especially at Capitola and Felton, where oftentimes you have a doubling of circulation. So the demand on staff goes up significantly. So as we next year open up 5 newly remodeled libraries, we're going to see a much higher demand on our services, while we are still trying to address this concern that we don't have the same staffing level that we once did. And so what we are attempting to do is demonstrate what we need essentially to operate these branches to meet that demand. And there's a lot more to it, so that's why I'm going to turn it over to Laura to take it from here. Thank you.
So this did come out of a discussion that we had with the Library Joint Powers Board about staffing. And for me, it was the opportunity that we have only 4 branches currently open. As they come back online, this seemed like the perfect time to institute something new, but old and normal. And so I kind of attacked this with a little bit of vigor. So I hope it's not overwhelming or anything. But our primary goals with this was to provide a framework for determining staff level requirements at each branch based on its designation. To provide open hours, services, and programs based on staffing levels, and to use this framework in the future to determine staffing needs as branches open. Hours may increase, hours may decrease, programs may increase, programs may decrease. So ideally, it's a very flexible model that we can work from. And Sarah, do I flip this? Or could you go one more, please? Thank you. So usually when you go into any of our branch libraries, the folks that are helping you at the service desk are our circulation staff. They're library assistants from LA2 up to LA4 in classification. And what I did was look at what our current classification breakdown is, and then what we need to reach what we're calling a minimal level of service. Now, the librarians, it's not that they don't have desk shifts and they're not helping patrons in the buildings, but they also have program responsibilities, service responsibilities, outreach responsibilities. So really, it's our library assistants that are the backbone of the library. Could you go on to the next, please? Thank you. Now, pre-pandemic staffing levels, and this is from 2017 when hours were increased across the branches. We had challenges, mainly at our smaller facilities. So if you look at this graph, the blue columns are the open hours per week of each location. The orange is the number of staff hours we need to minimally staff that building per our MOUs with the unions and safety, depending on the branch. The gray is the staff hours we actually had in the buildings. And then the yellow was our reliance on temporary at-will employees. And so we were actually in a negative deficit for regular staffing at our smallest branches and Capitola, which, because it was so busy, even when it was in the small modulars, they were also operating at a deficit for regular staff. And these are the circulation staff, our library assistants, plus the hours of librarians that were actually assigned to desk shifts at that time. But it really does show some areas were really good, others not so much. So started looking at what our challenges are. And this does talk about the reliance on the temporary staff. And there's two really key points with working with temporary staff. They can choose what shifts they want to accept, where they want to work. Many work other jobs that might pay better. So it's not unusual for them to call and say, I'm sorry, I can't come in today, or just not pick up shifts. So it's very tenuous if you're going to have staffing. It also requires a continual recruitment, hiring, and training of new temporary employees. So it's a huge drain on regular staff, on our administrative staff trying to keep track. Someone has to interview and then place these folks. We ended up, there was over 100 temporary staff by the time the pandemic hit, and we were still having problems filling the shifts. So our next one. Here are our challenges for staffing, which is balancing the open hours, the services we provide, the programs, while adhering to the MOU agreements and providing a safe work environment. We do have for our permanent staff a 2-day off in a row requirement, and that's through the MOUs. We also try our darndest to provide that to our our part-time staff. Covering vacations and sick days. When you're minimally staffed, that can be very hard to do. And currently with the pandemic, even while it's lessening, the local pool of potential temporary staff is shallow. and we're not the only ones struggling to find folks, especially those with professional experience. Because when the librarian goes out, we need somebody with that professional experience to work the desk. And then right now, well, since about 2018 with Capitola, the destruction photos crossed my timeline this morning. We've been opening and closing branches, which totally skews statistics. And then whoop, COVID. And we just really don't know what's going on other than as we open the buildings, they're huge surge in usage. So it's a little hard to estimate where we're going. Now, here are our level of service definitions. The minimum is the emphasis on open hours, material handling with limited patron services and programs. Because we are focused more on helping the person with the circulation, with the collection. Standard, the emphasis is again, open hours, material handling, but also an increase in hours, increase in patron services, and all ages programming at all branches. We're looking for community engagement, school partnerships, and providing professional librarian services at most locations. Now, the designations for the branches, those folks who have been around a while, Mike is one, so this is going to seem very similar to him. We're looking at something akin to a tier system. And so the designation would be dependent upon the geographic location, the direct service population, the facilities and amenities provided, circulation and visitation statistics. The designation can be fluid because we do know there's an ebb and flow with how branches are used, especially as we have the new branches. It's just going to jump around for a while. And the designations, rather than calling them the old-fashioned tier 1, 2, and 3, we're looking at neighborhood, which would be our smaller branches, community, and regional. The community is probably the group that would have the most flexibility between. Now, our determinants are, of course, the circulation and visitation statistics. I don't really have good visitation statistics for you right now because of the pandemic. The service population, the facilities and amenities, the location, and then contractual issues that the library may have with the jurisdictions. Right now, I'm only aware of one that's absolutely binding, and we'll go to that next. Yes.
Thank you. The visitation statistics, is that the number of people who walk into a library, even if they don't need help, even if they don't check out a book, but maybe sit and read a newspaper?
Yes.
Okay.
Is each of our entryways have a people counter? So we do have an idea of what the physical use of the building is. Sometimes it's someone coming in to use the lavatory, and sometimes it's someone coming in for a program or to get a book. So now, one of our determinants is the circulation. And so we looked at the loaning branch, and I went back to the first quarter of 2017-18, because that was the last quarter that Capitola was open before we tore it down. And then looked at the first quarter of this year, even though we only have 4 buildings open.
Stop it.
And it's crazy. And so if you look at that, Capitola in its old building served 44,000 items in the first quarter. This quarter, its first full quarter being open, almost 90,000. It's very impressive. And let's see, who else is Felton? And that is coming from the smaller building, but the smaller building was open until 3 weeks before we opened the new one. So you can really see the use. Now, we do have some buildings that they either closed before this quarter or during this quarter. Live Oak and Scotts Valley especially. Boulder Creek's been closed for over a year, almost 2 years now. Garfield Park's been closed for a year. But
this does give us an idea of what sort of numbers we're looking at. Aptos, when the first quarter in 17, 71,000. I think we could expect 130 when it reopens easily. And so we will be seeing these surges, which that's another thing for us to go, we have to have staff for this, especially that first year.
Yeah, I do have a question. If I
Yes.
can unmute. Oh. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just wondering about the downtown branch statistics. Well, how
Yes.
do you explain that? The reduction?
The reduction, I think part of it is people are not going out in the community in the same numbers as they were pre-pandemic still. There's not a lot to attract you in downtown right now. Shops are just starting to come on back online, restaurants. There's no movie theater anymore. That's gone. And people, I think if they're coming into a library building, they are staying closer to home at this point.
I see.
And we've also seen a huge rise in our electronic resources. So I think that's something that may stay with us.
And I would add one more. I think just right, Laura, you're right on. But we're not opening our program rooms for children's programming until January. And so if we're not bringing in large numbers of kids for that programming, then we're not circulating large numbers of children's books.
Yes, yes. Downtown had a very vibrant children's program going on. So yeah, good point. So now I started looking at number of years going back to try to determine, should we base this wholly on circulation stats, and it just didn't work. But for a neighborhood facility, circulation quarterly up to 20,000. And then the community anywhere from 25 to 45,000. And then regional 50,000 and above, which kind of aligns with the facilities that we have, the neighborhoods we have. So to me, they seem like good numbers. We do at some of our larger facilities circulate 80, 90, over 100,000 items a quarter when we're not in a global catastrophe. Our next one. Are some of the additional determinants the facilities? Are there meeting rooms? Are there study rooms? Are there outdoor program sitting and program space? Boulder Creek has an amphitheater. So what's the available parking? Because that is going to be a driver for people to go to a location. Is there public transit nearby? Another driver. And then the physical location. I love this library. It's great. It's wonderful for La Silva. You do have to know where it's at. Boulder Creek is the same way. That's my community. You need to know where the library is. So we kind of had to look at that as well. And even Live Oak, big, lovely library. And you don't have to know it's there. Once you find it, then it's good. So the other is the contractual issues with the JPA. There is one current binding document that we are aware of, that the Capitola branch has to have equal or greater open hours as Aptos. And that was created in, I believe, 2013. There's an older, when the Scotts Valley branch was renovated in the old roller rink, that stated Scotts Valley had to have equal or greater hours than Live Oak. And the language is using the terminology of a tier 2 branch, which definitely tells me it's pre-2011 for that document. And so those are the only two we can find at this point. Then our determinant is the patron home branch. This is a little interesting to use. This is where individuals receive their library card, renew their library card, or say, this is where I want to pick up my items. So it doesn't necessarily mean these folks all live in these communities, but this is their library of choice. And so this is the patron home branch from 21-22. And it kind of holds true. I'm not real surprised. Yes, Tricia.
Thank you, Laura. This is so interesting. I love this kind of data. So that JPA rule where they are kind of laying down kind of rules about open hours, is that something that once you kind of get through this analysis and we have the branches open, that we might want to try to, you know, revisit? I mean, would the JPA be open to that, or is it just kind of like, this is the way we do it and we're just going to do it this way?
Well, one of them is an actual legal binding document. So, and that's with the city of Capitola. So
Okay,
I'm not sure we could actually do anything with that.
Okay,
Unless they voted unanimously
Yes.
to change it.
okay, yeah.
Just to follow up on that, before we leave that topic though, could you explain, or does somebody know the rationale behind, like, that Capitola has to have greater equal hours than Aptos? And
It was part of the agreement at the beginning of the Measure S process. So it is, I want to say about 2010, the discussions really started, and this was something that came out of it. The motivation, I don't know. I couldn't say.
It was an extension of the RDA agreement,
Oh,
the
okay.
defunct RDA. And a certain load was put on Capitola to take RDA money and put it into a library fund. And that was used as leverage when the Measure S came out, and how much of that RDA money was going into the construction project. Smoke filled back room. Well, I was muted.
I was just gonna say, it might be something like, as you guys move through this process though, like if that becomes something that just doesn't like rationally make sense anymore, given what the numbers are showing, it should absolutely be something that we would bring up.
If I could just- Although as someone who is at the Capitola branch now every week, where I used to be at Aptos, it is such a beautiful, welcoming, inviting building that everybody I know wants to go and spend time at. So I can see why the use numbers have gone up dramatically.
This also speaks to one of the flaws of the JPA, which is any decisions have to be unanimous. Unanimity in any government body. So, and the city manager of Capitola sits on that body. So, yeah, there's good news, bad news.
Yeah.
The designations, based on everything that I looked at, somewhat mirror what the old system had. So the neighborhood branches would be Boulder Creek, Garfield Park, and La Selva Beach. The community, Branson 40, that one's a bit of a wild card, honestly. Felton and Live Oak. And then regional would be Aptos, Capitola, Downtown, and Scotts Valley. We also want to include our outreach services, which we're calling Beyond Our Walls. And so that's bookmobile, the correction facility visits that we do, the community outreach to underserved populations, the virtual services that are provided throughout the system with the telephone information and the live answers. So that's kind of what we came up with. Now, here's our neighborhoods. And the proposal is that they would be open 34 hours per week, 5 days a week. Now, the board for this fiscal year, we had asked for 1.5 FTE of library assistant 2 positions. And those were for a half-time position at each location, Boulder Creek, Garfield Park, and La Selva Beach. So we are now staffed really well for our little branches. We are not in a deficit, and I thank the board for that. And using that staffing level, we can meet all of our requirements at 34 hours per week. I might be able to squeeze out one more hour. I don't know. And this is, again, to provide the requirements as well as the safety and the level of public service for the minimal level. So our next one is the community. And so it's a terrible picture of Branson 40. I'm sorry. It's a hard building to get a good shot of. And we're looking at 40 hours per week and open 5 days a week here. Now, the staffing level that we would want to be matching is the staffing level that's currently at Live Oak. And to reach that, we actually need one additional library assistant to FTE for this upcoming fiscal year. And that FTE would be divided between Felton and Branson 40. But that allows us to do a really good 40 hours, 5 days a week at these locations. Now, the regional is interesting because of downtown. So I'm going to talk about the other three first, which is, of course, Aptos, Capitola, and Scotts Valley. We can get them to 50 hours per week, 7 days a week. So we would have Sunday across the board in each of our locales. We do need, in the upcoming year, one FTE of a library assistant too. And then as we get ready to open Aptos and the Aptos staff that's currently at Capitola transition back to Aptos, we would need another 0.5 FTE library assistant two, and then one full-time librarian 1/2. And we would be pulling two positions that are currently they're frozen because we didn't need to utilize them right away, but they're already budgeted for, and that's for Capitola. Downtown, if we stay in the same location, if we move hopefully to the new facility, we're looking at still having 2 stories, which means you have a minimum of 2 service desks. And since we also have a reference service, we're looking at staffing 3. When you have 2 floors, you have to have at least 2 people per floor to keep an eye on everything. And because downtown is one of our more popular locations, we get a lot of folks come in. We need a lot of people going through the stacks helping out. And just the sheer amount of material handling at downtown is amazing. So we're also looking there 50 hours a week, 7 days a week. Once we can fill the currently vacant positions, we actually don't need any additional staff for downtown. So that's pretty nice. And hopefully we're going to get that done very soon. That's my presentation. Our goal is to stabilize the staffing, stabilize the hours, make the hours make sense. Because when we shut down in March 2019, we had Boulder Creek was open 38 hours, Branson 40 was open 36. I think Live Oak was open 40, Felton was 44, Capitola, when it closed, was 41. They were very strange hours. And this tells us if we have the same hours by designation, we know what our staffing level needs are. It won't change. And we can then look at it. If Branson 40 is at the community level, we staff it for that. But if it drops, then we know we don't have to, and we can lower that designation. And I'm picking on Branson 40, but it could be anybody. So do you have any?
And I just wanted to jump in there. Thank you. Sorry. Laura has really given us a very logical kind of roadmap to navigate this with. And I just want us to keep in mind, though, that we still need to hire, if we try to get these goals, to get to the minimum, not the standard, but the minimum, we still need to get the board to provide us with some more staff. And then the other thing to keep in mind is we're a 10 branch system, but we really see it as 11 libraries because at 11th library is our outreach. And so it's really kind of the determinant there is how much staff and what is it we're trying to achieve in the community. And that's why we started the mission with equitable services, because quite frankly, a lot of people can't make it to our branches. And so we try to bring the branches to them. And that's what we believe is part of the equitable side of the equation, to the amount that we can do that. We certainly have beautiful buildings. We're going to have more, and we want people to come into them. And we also know that the more outreach we do, the more people actually will make the effort to get into the libraries if they can. But that's just something to keep in mind. We're really an 11 branch system, is another way of thinking about it. And then just to get to the minimum, we do need the board to get us some more staff. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Fine. Thanks, Eric. That actually helped me kind of formulate my question. So I did notice all the way through it was minimum staffing. So once you layer programming on top of that, is that staffing for the programming coming from headquarters, or is that a revolving staffing that goes branch to branch to help with programming?
No, actually, it's the librarians will still be at the branches, and they will still be providing the early literacy programs, hopefully an after-school program, partnering with community groups for adult programs. We're still have that keyed into this particular plan.
Into the minimum?
Into the minimum. When we start talking though about really doing outreach to schools and community groups and being part of the community and the special events and the more robust programming, that's when we need to really make sure that the librarians are not on the service desk, and that there is nothing wrong with checking out books, but they're professionals, and really we want them to be focusing on that professional level of service, whether it's reference or programming or classes or technology. Right now, they are a pretty key component to getting our minimum number of staffing on board. Not that they necessarily are going to be on the service desk. They may be working on other programs, or they may be putting on that children's program. So there's a big mix that happens, but to get where we would want to be, we'd want to be pulling them more off of the desk so that they can be providing these services. And for that, we need to kind of bump up the LA, the library assistants, which is why we're really focusing on the library assistants as being the driver for the open hours.
Vice Chair Dubin, have a question?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for all your work. I think it's really interesting, and I think it's really valuable. I do want to say just my own personal opinion is how important the 7-day a week is. And I'm really glad to see that, because I think it's definitely needed. And that hasn't always, I think only downtown has been open 7 days a week. And there's just those times when your printer breaks, or, you know, those services that you just need to be able to go in. So I think it's really, really valuable. And I just on this other topic, I am really, I would encourage you to be asking not just for the minimum, but I would like us to be asking for as much as we really need from the JPA to allocate for those staffing levels, because I think all of those programs are important. I really respect the librarians who have been trained, and I know there have been a lot of different shuffles over the years at various branches, and it made a huge difference for me as a mom when we would go into libraries where there were people who were really trained in children's library services versus just someone who's very friendly and nice trying to help us. So I don't know anything, if you need to bump those numbers up, I would like to see that, and I would advocate for those numbers to be even more, because it seems to me that that's what might be needed for a really robust system.
Commissioner Ripma?
So did you already say what your plans are for the 100 temporary staff? Is your goal to lower the number?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Ideally, it would be a lower number. We're always going to need temporary staff because
Mhm.
some of them make up our aides who are the shelvers,
Mhm.
and others we do need for when people are out sick, when people are on vacations away from the buildings, but not the same huge level that we had pre-pandemic. That was just not a manageable number for us or for them, really. There's no investment if you're only picking up 1 shift or 2 shifts a month.
Mm.
So we would be looking at, I haven't gone through those numbers yet of determining what we've been using for the last, 9 months, almost a year, is we reinstated what we call a floater. It's a temporary position where we guarantee them 20 hours a week. And they go where we say we need them to go. And it's a very effective program. It's so effective that they become really well trained, and when we have openings, they tend to get, because they have the experience that comes with it. But we are looking at that for library assistant coverage. The librarian coverage, we do need that professional staff, so we do have quite a few retirees, not just from our system, but others. And I'm in discussions with San Jose State's library school about having their students who are in their final year become on-call librarians so they can get some professional experience before they go out into the job market. So we're working on that too.
Mhm.
Questions? Commissioner Termini, do you have a question?
I did. Well, first of all, thank you. The first graph was said it all. You do the most with the least resources consistently. The 7 days a week, brilliant. How can this body advocate for your aides?
Yeah.
You want to take that one, Eric?
Well, I mean, I think, it's always important for the board to hear your thoughts and reflections on this issue and on any issue. So, I mean, that's, and then you certainly know your community, and you know what your community wants. And so I loved your idea of having got more of an engagement with the community, similar to what we were doing with the architects. And it doesn't have to be that formal, but it can be something along those lines. And then you can hear from your neighbors what they want and share with them what you're learning here. I think the great thing now about this environment that we have where things are recorded, we have to kind of like remember when we have new members we have now a recording on conflict of interest. And Susan did one too on finances for the library. We have to kind of put together a library of these things so that new commissioners can see them. But they're also useful for the public so that you can just send them this link. And what I've done too is I've just gone online and I've seen like, okay, the conversation starts at 55 minutes, and then I tell them that and I send that link to them, and then they just can click on that time, so they don't have to watch the whole thing if they want to watch the whole meeting. But these segments are really worth just kind of bookmarking and then and sending to them. Thank you for the question.
Vice Chair Dubin?
Yeah, I just, I'm not sure it was answered though, because I would really like to know what we can do to support you with the staffing and to make sure that what you need is really happening. If that's a motion that you think would be helpful to the JPA or.
I understand what you said, excuse me, but it's one thing for us to know our community and maybe to reach out to our individual city manager or supervisor. But I think some action by this board in the form of a motion as a message, and perhaps at our next meeting, something could be, an agenda item could be brought up, and we can actually vote on it so that this passes down formally to the JPA, so it has more impact.
No, I think, one thing to think about is, do you want minimal, do you want standard, or do you want something else? That could be the what you're seeking to
We want as much as we can get. I think that's always been the thrust for the community, for the libraries, to help They'll
Yeah.
take, 100 hours a week if you give it to them.
Commissioner Wynne?
Well, I like that idea of re-agendizing this item and maybe coming up with, a recommendation to the JPA on what we would like to see, but then put in, at a minimum, this is really, what we're asking for, but know that we're going to come back and ask for more. I mean, it's, right now we have some libraries closed. So, it's kind of hard to make a big request because Aptos is closed and it's going to be closed for a while. So, and then downtown's going to close. Oh, right. You're right. I'm sorry. Thank you. But, once we get libraries open, then we'd be in a position to go back in and ask. But I agree with both, council members, Termini and Dubin. We should write a letter of strong support for this, library proposal.
Let me ask just a couple of clarifying questions. And thank you so much for laying all of that out. That information was really, really interesting to see some of the dynamics you guys are picking up in circulation. I had a question. You mentioned that some of these positions are currently frozen. And to get back to a minimum, you would unfreeze them, their requests. And that's, if that could be, if I'm hearing very clearly that we'll want to bring this back on a future agenda. But if that could be kind of spelled out in a report back to commissioners as part of kind of a staff recommendation, that would be helpful to kind of understand how you guys are building back those positions into the budget. And then what would be, I'm kind of curious because you guys never recovered from the initial recession. At what point do you start adding positions that, have been off the books for quite some time, right? And what exactly are neighborhoods getting for those additional positions? And one way, and if we do bring this back, a way could be helpful to structure this, and my brain always works, is you have the Pinto version, you have the Prius version, and then you have the Tesla version. And what are those incremental benefits that you get with each of those additional options, right? So what does that actually mean for, say, a neighborhood branch versus community branch versus regional branch? So any additional work you all could do to begin to add some flavor to that. And I think Eric's point is a really good one for commissioners in terms of how can we solicit, like take that information, and engage, our own communities in terms of what do you like, this is what we would get, in the Pinto version, this is what we would have to advocate for to get these additional services. Would you be supportive of that? And give us, the information we would need to have those conversations. That would be really helpful if that's possible.
And I also feel strongly that the Friends groups, not only the Friends organization, but the Friends chapters. Capitola has a very strong Friends chapter, so does Aptos, so does Scotts Valley. I mean, they should be enlisted to write letters also saying we support the library. That's kind of what we're all about. I did also have one follow-up question. Was there any funding in either the CARES Act or the stimulus bill, or, did the state have money for libraries? Because certainly libraries were so affected by COVID. It seems like, or even in the infrastructure bill, because if there is, we should definitely be clamoring for that.
There really wasn't with the various stimulus and pandemic bills, other than there was some money for supplies. The hand wipes and face masks and
They
all.
did provide money for ebooks during the pandemic, and there has been some kind of back and forth with it regarding in the infrastructure bill that I don't know what actually has if there's anything that's going to bear fruit on it. But that was specifically for libraries. But
California was looking at asking for, the last thing I heard today, an additional 34 million for something. But what I did hear, it didn't sound like libraries were necessarily part of the bill package coming to the state right now, but not that there's not more that's being asked for, that no one seems to know exactly what it is yet.
The only, coming from the perspective of hearing about, at least from the city of Santa Cruz standpoint, structural deficits and the cost of staff, just thinking about, strategies to make these additions of services sustainable from a funding standpoint. And so what that looks like, what you would need from the JPA to make that work. Must be great to include.
and no, it's a great question. It's always and it does require some more analysis on our part. One thing that we're examining is we have this fund for the temp staff, and we wouldn't have to rely on the temp staff as much if we were able to fill these gaps. And so we could move some of that money over from that line item to fill this. And so we are diving into that analysis some more, but I think we do have to start to kind of ask these questions when we've invested so much in these buildings. And the focus of the minimum is that we're staffing to have them open. And we're, even with the frozen positions, once those are unfrozen, we still need to go above that in order to get to that minimum. And so, it is a matter of those priorities.
At the same time, we're also looking very casually at the moment for materials handling systems, the automation, which then frees up staff from having to do a lot of the material handling so that they are out there to help with the patrons, to help with the services, and do those things that we're looking to achieve in the standard level of service. So that's something we've been casually looking at right now.
Vice Chair Dubin?
Can you explain how what that is different than the self-checkout?
It's different than the self-checkout. One of the things we're looking at with the downtown facility is an automated return system, which they can actually read the barcode and then send them into the right crate for shipping or into the right book truck for where it needs to go, or tag it that it has a hold. So staff aren't each one and wanding them in. I don't know if we want to look down the road at RFID, which is a big lift to do that. But that is something that with the self-checks, you could put 12 items there and boom, it's all checked out. At the same time, staff can grab a stack and put it on there and they're all checked in. It also makes the handling on the shelves when you're searching for items or lost items, inventory. But it's a big commitment and a fairly expensive one to do. So, but these are all things that we've been discussing, trying to figure out how can we do this without incurring, because we all are aware that staff is expensive. What can be done? But
Great. Well, thank you again so much, Laura. That was fantastic. Thank you for all the work and analysis that you've been doing. And to the broader library team that's been engaging in those conversations. Clearly, commissioners are very, very interested and supportive of the direction that you all are going. And I think we would love to see some additional potential scenarios, given the work that you've started, kind of build on that, potentially have a follow-up conversation at our next meeting, working towards some more robust recommendation to the JPA.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Great. Wow, 2 meaty presentations on the agenda. That was really helpful. And thank you, Eric, for flagging that those are really resources that we can point people to. Moving right along, it's getting late in the evening. Item number 8 on the general business agenda is our calendar for 2022. It seems like a pretty routine item. The calendar was laid out in our packets. Are there any questions or concerns with what's been presented in the packet? Yes, Vice Chair Dubin.
I was just curious about the July date and if that's, have we met in the summertime before, and if there's a JPA meeting associated with that?
I'm going to defer.
That's a great question. No, actually, I think the JPA skips July is the proposed one sometimes. Let's see. I don't have it in front of me, but I believe that is, you are right. Nearly 99.9% sure.
We don't do June, right?
We
Or
don't do
August.
June. We do have a July date in here. And I do believe we've met
I think so.
in the past
Mhm.
in July. This would be 7 meetings for the year. Are there any other?
Well, it
Yep.
just seems like it would be an awfully long time to not meet if we didn't meet from May till September. So I'm comfortable meeting in July. I don't know if that's the right date, but I checked my calendar, it looked fine, so.
Great question. If there aren't any other comments or questions, are there any motions on this item?
I move approval of these dates.
Okay, so we have a move to approve our 2022 calendar of dates by Commissioner Wynne and a second by Commissioner Termini. Clerk Simona Vargas, will you do a roll call vote?
Rena Dubin,
Aye.
Mary Ripma,
Aye.
Mike Termini,
Aye.
Pamela Woll,
Aye.
Tricia Wynne,
Aye.
and Chair Lindsay Bass.
Just lost it. Oh, there it is. Aye. Outstanding. Okay, great. That passes unanimously, which brings us to our final agenda item. I'm losing my place here, which is scheduled upcoming meetings. Our next meeting will be January 24th at the Felton branch. We continue our tour. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time this evening. That brings us to the last item, which is adjournment.
Yay. Thank you. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great meeting you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
terrific.
Thanks.
Yeah.